Good morning, you guys. I just finished the math chat with you guys, and it was great to see you guys, and I really enjoyed it. But now it's time for Bible time. Sorry, the First Samuel 24 took so long to get on. RenWeb was having issues, so I had some trouble getting it on. Hopefully, this one will get on um, in an appropriate time. So we're in First Samuel chapter 25 now. In chapter 24, let's see, in chapter 24, David had been hiding, if you remember, in the caves, and Saul came in, and David had a chance to kill him. He had every right to kill him. He was even given permission to kill him by God, but he didn't. And David comes out and shows Saul how right he was and how wrong Saul was, and Saul's repentant, kind of, and but he really wasn't. And we see that David doesn't believe him because David doesn't go back home. Even though Saul goes back home, David doesn't go back home. Sorry. I have 3 children. I'm tired. But so David doesn't go back home, and we can see that he kind of probably doesn't trust Saul fully, even though because Saul's repented once before, and it didn't do anything. Excuse me. So, chapter 25. The first verse says, "Then Samuel died." I mean, what a way to start. Samuel dies here at the start of the chapter. Without pomp and circumstance, without all this fanfare and everything, Samuel dies. He lived a great life before God. He was a godly man, but he dies at the beginning of the chapter. And so this we would think would be a bad sign for David because Samuel kind of has been helping David here and there, and he's a voice for the Lord on the earth. And he's been somebody who's kind of restrained Saul at certain times, but now he's died. And David arose and went down to the wilderness of Paran. Verse 2. Whoops. Well, you can still see me. My lamp fell over. Verse 2. Now there was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel, and the man was very rich. He had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. I don't know what that translates to as far as dollars go, but he was rich. He had it was a lot of sheep. And he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. So this is a type of thing where, excuse me, this was the type of situation that would be classic time that you'd get robbed, that you'd get raided by people. People would come and take from you, and so he's in Carmel shearing his tons and tons of sheep, and as we find out, and the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife was Abigail. And she was a woman of good understanding and beautiful appearance. She was smart and beautiful, but the man was harsh and evil in all his doings. He was of the house of Caleb, so he was an evil, evil man. And we're going to find out kind of stupid too. And when David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep, David sent 10 young men. And David said to the young men, "Go up to Carmel, go to Nabal, and greet him in my name. And thus you shall say to him who lives in prosperity, Peace be to you, peace to your house, and peace to all that you have. I have heard that you have shearers. Your shepherds were with us, and we did not hurt them, nor is there anything missing from them all the while that they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we come on a feast day. Please give whatever comes to your hand." Excuse me. "Please give whatever comes to your hand to us." So essentially, what had happened was that while Nabal was shearing his sheep, which I had mentioned was something that was very dangerous because you're out in the open in the fields. Shearing sheep, by the way, means taking all the wool off, so you could sell it and make things out of it. And so I'm sorry, you guys are still chatting. And it's coming up on my computer here. Sorry about that. So shearing sheep was taking the wool off the sheep, and and it was something that was very dangerous. Robbers would come by, and you'd have, it'd be something you'd be scared that you would, get robbed and lose all your money. Well, David actually provided a very important service here. He and his men um, stayed near the shearers, and um, not only did they not rob him, which is great, shows that they were very kind to not take the things. Not only that, but they were essentially protection for the sheep shearers. And the sheep shearers were safe while David and his men were there. And they took as much time as they wanted, and they sheared all the sheep, and they made sure everything was safe. And David and his men were like bodyguards, but essentially just by being there. And so they come on a feast day, and they're traveling from place to place. So obviously they're very hungry. They aren't eating really anything. And so they come on a feast day, and they say to Nabal, who has plenty of food, he has just tons and tons of food. They say, hey, ask your servants. We're honorable guys. We were very kind to you, very kind to your men, and we made sure that we did not take anything from them, and we even protected them. So in exchange, if there's any way that you could give us some food, you have plenty of food. That wasn't a doubt. You had tons of food. We could just take a little bit of food. We're really hungry. We'd appreciate it. And so it's really not an extreme request here. Again, not only were they not bad to Nabal, but they did something important in that them being there made sure that he didn't lose any of his money. They protected his money. And so them saying, hey, could you, by the way, do this for me? It would be like, picture, let's say you lost your dog, right? And it's middle of a hurricane, and you're really worried. You lost your dog, but you're worried about going outside, and you happen to see a police officer, and you say to the police officer, "Sir, I need my dog. I'm worried. I'm looking for my puppy, and he's lost. But I'm worried about going outside in the hurricane." The police officer said, "Well, I'm off duty right now, but you know what? I'll take care of it. You just stay inside. You stay safe. I'll go look for him." And hours and hours and hours pass, and all of a sudden you hear a knock at your door. And you open the door, and it's him. He's soaked. He's got like water all down his face, and he's just soaked. But he's got your puppy in his hand. He's like, "Oh, I found him. Here he is, and he was in the bushes and here and there, and I found him and I rescued him. He was in a very difficult spot. It was like there was water piling up and everything. Here's your puppy." And you say, "Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it." And he asks you, "Hey, I've been out for a while. Is there any way to just come inside and warm up? Maybe use the bathroom really quickly and get you have coffee or tea or something? I've been out there for hours just to warm up a little bit. Maybe I could have a towel to dry off my face or something." You'd obviously be like, "Absolutely, yeah, whatever you want. Sure, you want some dinner? I'll cook you dinner. Anything. You save my little puppy." Right? Doesn't that make sense? Let's see how Nabal responds, though. Verse 10. Nabal answered David's servants and said, "Who is David, and who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants nowadays who break away, each one from his master. Shall I then take bread and my water and my meat, and then that I have killed from my shears, and give it to men whom, when I do not know where they're from?" Essentially, he's like, "Who'd you come from? David? Yeah, he's a nobody. He's a nobody, and he's just a rebellious renegade who ran away from his master, and I do not respect him." He's essentially saying, "I don't respect David. I'm not afraid of him, and I don't respect him. He wants food. Well, too bad. He's getting nothing." And so not only did he refuse, but he didn't even refuse in a polite way. He refused in a really, really rude way and said, "He's getting nothing. Tell him that, it was essentially the equivalent of that police officer saying, is there any way that you could give me a towel to like dry off with or something, or maybe a cup of coffee? Is there any way I could trouble you for that?" And you'd be like, "You know what? Get out of my house." And you like spit on him and kick him and say, "Get out of my property before I call the police and have you arrested." And you kick him and I don't know, you push him out the door. Say, "Get out." And you push him right out the door and he falls onto the lawn. I wouldn't be surprised if he would be angry. Wouldn't you say that All right, looks like I had to start the video over again. Oh well. Um, I'm just gonna keep that, and well, it doesn't matter to you. I'm just gonna try to paste them both together. So hopefully it worked. Anyway, we pick up on verse 12 that David's young men turned on their heels and went back, and they came and told them all these words. Then David said to his young men, as you can imagine, he was pretty insulted. He was pretty aggravated. Um, every man gird on his sword. So every man girded on his sword. He goes, you know what? We're going to battle. So every man girded on his sword, and David also girded on his sword. And about 400 men went with David, and 200 men stayed with the supplies. Now one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, look, David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master, and he reviled them. So basically, David's on his way to attack him. So one of the servants goes and finds Abigail. And I feel like this is the type of thing that may have happened once before. They might be used to Nabal doing foolish things, and they go to Abigail and say, Abigail, excuse me, Nabal has messed up again. And he made this decision to explain the whole thing to Abigail, that David and his men were very good to them, and they didn't take anything from them. And then they explain throughout the next few verses what has happened, and they even say, now therefore no one consider what you'll do, for harm is determined against our master and against his household, for he is such a scoundrel that one cannot speak to him. And they say he can't even you can't even speak to the guy. He's so crazy, and and so and he's so you know, you can't even speak to him because he's so um, stubborn and rude. And so verse 18, Abigail made haste and took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep already dressed, 5 seed, and she just happens to have all of this stuff on hand, which goes to show how much food they had. They had tons and tons of food, and so she loaded them up on donkeys, and so she goes and travels to David, but didn't tell Nabal because she knows he's a fool. And so it was. She rode, and as she's going down, they're right in the middle of David and his men, all geared up, ready for battle. They're huffing and puffing, angry. We're gonna go get him, and because they were insulted. And she met them, and David was so angry. In verse 21, he's saying, surely in vain I protected all that this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed at all that belongs to him, and he's repaid me evil for good. May God do so and more also to the enemies of David if I leave one male of all who belong to him by morning light. Basically, like, I'm going to attack him or I'm going to destroy him. I promise I'm going to destroy him. And and if he accuses me of being a raider who would just kind of come and take advantage of things and steal, he goes, I can do that if he wants me to. And so he's promising to attack him. But when Abigail saw him, she dismounted quickly from the donkey and fell on her face before David, bowing low to the ground. She basically, she's not like worshiping him. She's taking the position that, of humility, like, and she says in verse 24, on me, my Lord, on me let this iniquity be, and please let your maidservant speak in your ears. Please let not my Lord regard this scoundrel Nabal, for so as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, your maidservant, did not see the young men of my Lord, whom you sent. She basically is like, this is my fault. This is my fault, David. I didn't realize that you had that you'd sent servants to there. If you had sent servants, I would have given them stuff. You kind of get the idea that she's like, I kind of have to clean up for him because he makes so many messes. I kind of have to fix a lot of issues. I have to fix all his messes, and I apologize. It's my fault. I wish I'd realized the servants were there, and I would have given them plenty. And she explains, his name is Nabal, and it's appropriate that his name is Nabal. Nabal means fool, and it's funny that it means fool, and he really is foolish. She's like, he's kind of an idiot. His name is Fool, and I just basically have to clean up after his messes, and he just ruins everything. And so you can see her humility, that she takes the blame even when it's obviously not to blame. And who does this remind you of a few chapters ago? reminds you of David, right? When it really was Saul's fault when Saul killed all the priests at Nob, but then David says, it's my fault. I saw him there and I should have known, and when really it's Saul's fault. But so um, she goes and gives him all this stuff in verses 26 and 27, and she says, she says, please forgive the trespass, your maidservant. For the Lord will certainly make my Lord an enduring house, because she like compliments him, and all this stuff through verse 30 and 31. She said, she says all these great things like you're great and you're this and you're that, and she says all these wonderful, wonderful complimentary words, and really changes the heart of David. We see in verse 32, David says to Abigail, "Blessed is the Lord God of Israel who sent you this day to me, and blessed is your advice, and blessed are you, because you have kept me this day from coming to bloodshed and revenging myself by my own hand." Because she had said previously that she's like, don't worry about it. God's going to take care of Nabal, and just when he does, remember me and remember I told you this, because God's going to take care of him. Don't you worry. And she changes his mind. And he says, "Blessed are you, I was going to take vengeance myself upon Nabal, and I would have acted out in anger." But he said, "Thank you so much for talking sense into me," because he kind of comes into his right mind. He's like, "What am I doing? I'm not the type to take vengeance myself and act out in anger." He goes, "That's not me. That's not who I am. I lost myself for a minute." And he's like, "Thank you so much for stopping me from doing something I probably would have regretted." And he says to her in verse 35, "Go up in peace to your house. I've heeded your voice and respected your person. Go ahead, go in peace. I thank you so much." And he's just blown away by this woman who's just unbelievably humble. And he's like, and she just really, leaves an impression on him. And he leaves. And so Abigail went to Nabal. And meanwhile, what is he doing? Just like the fool that he is, while all this trouble's going on, he's having a feast. And it says his heart was merry within him, for he was drunk, and therefore she told him nothing. He was like, he was drinking and eating and going on and having this crazy feast, and little did he know the trouble that was narrowly avoided. So it was when the wine had gone from him in verse 37 in the morning, his wife told him these things, and so she's like, when he kind of sobers up in the morning and just kind of wakes up and out of his partying that he had been doing. She says to him, "Nabal, I have something to tell you." He's like, "What is it? What is it?" And she describes to him the events of the previous day, that David was coming with an army to kill you. And I went and I made it okay. But, she's explaining to him, you could have died. And so this is how foolish Nabal is. It says, when he heard these things, he was so shocked that his heart died within him, and he became like a stone. Now, this may have been judgment from God, that God was judging him and saying, because, because you were this way, I'm going to do this. It says after about 10 days, Nabal dies. But it also could have been just that he was so shocked that he just like keeled over, like, oh, and keels over. And how funny is it? How foolish is it that he's actually in danger. He's feeling fine, partying and everything. Then once the danger has passed, the danger's over. It's like, okay, it's all right, but guess what just happened? Guess what almost could have happened? And the danger's done. He's like, oh no, and he keels over. And so Nabal dies. And so this is a very sad circumstance for Abigail, because when a woman in these days became a widow, she would be oftentimes have to just fend for herself. She'd have to be a beggar. If she had no sons, she would have to, have somebody, beg. She'd have to beg to have people take care of her if her sons couldn't work. It would have been a sad thing to be a widow in these days. But David heard. Interesting thing to happen. David hears that Nabal was dead, because he said, "Blessed be the Lord who pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal and kept my servant from evil." He's like, oh my goodness, God is good, because he heard my prayer, and he knows that I could have taken vengeance on Nabal, and I had every right to, but I didn't. And so God took vengeance, and God made sure that the right thing happened. But he thought about Abigail. He's like, he felt bad for Abigail. He's like, she doesn't have a husband. She doesn't have somebody to provide for her now. And he thought about it and thought about it. And he said, and he ended up, look what he does in verse 39. And David sent and proposed to Abigail and took her as, and to take her as a wife. And when the servants of David had come to Abigail at Carmel, they spoke to her, saying, David sent us to you to ask you to become his wife. And she arose, bowed her face to the earth, and said, here is your maidservant, a servant to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord. So see how humble she is. She's basically like, I'm going to be basically a servant that would serve the lowest of the servants. But she presents herself in that way and runs in haste and comes to David. Now you might say, wait a minute, I thought David was already married to Michal. Well, we find out in 2 Samuel that at this point in time, Saul actually had taken Michal away from David after he had, remember, he escaped out the window and and left Michal there. Saul, when he heard Michal's lie about David that he threatened her, Saul took her away and gave her to somebody else, had her marry somebody else. So at this point in time, Michal is somebody else's wife, and so David is basically not married at this point. And so he marries Abigail. However, this doesn't mean that David is immune. We see at the end of the chapter, David also took Ahinoam of Jezreel, so both of them were his wives. So he falls into the trap that happened around these times that were not what God had chose for them. They were not supposed to multiply wives. That was something that the unsaved people did, the pagans did. But because that's what society typically did, that's what David and a lot of the godly men would do as well. And it never went well. Remember that. It never went well. But picture Abigail's position. Abigail was married to this awful, terrible guy. And yet she acted godly the entire time. She acted humility the entire time. And God rewarded her by taking her, that she married this fool of a man, and now she's marrying a guy who's gonna eventually be king. And so that is 1 Samuel 25. All right, have a great day, guys.